What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back on Rebel Radio. Welcome back to Rebel Radio. You guys are in for a treat today. This is my man, Dave Weiner. You probably don't know who he is, but he is the master of doing the opposite of what everyone else does in the music industry. And he's built a hell of a career out of that, you heard. And you're going to hear from Dave some lessons about being maybe the only honest guy or one of the few honest guys in a very shady business, in the art of building relationships, long-term relationships that last throughout a career. This guy discovered Master P back in the 90s when P was just a regional act in the Bay Area and helped guide No Limit Records to become a massive success and cultural force that it was, as well as working with artists like 8Ball and MJG and SIBO. And really, if you're into that, I don't know what you call it, they probably call it ratchet now, but that real dirty underground Bay Area thug music, Dave was the one putting out those records in the 90s, so you can thank him for that. And these days, he's at Strange Music, guiding the careers of Tech N9ne and artists like J-Rock, Hopspin, Murs. They have a whole cottage industry over there that we're going to learn about how they do that. So good stuff coming up. And now Dave Weiner. Right on. So welcome to Rebel Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Dave Weiner, our guest today. I appreciate you being here. I'm excited to talk to you because, I've said this on the show before, that I get to talk to my friends and still learn stuff about them that I never knew.
Right.
And, we've hung out a lot. Your wife was in my wedding.
Yeah.
And, we've been on vacations together but you don't interview your friends.
Right.
So there's like still all kind of stuff that I really don't know about you professionally.
To see what's been on your mind.
Yeah. And you're a guy, I talk about you more probably than you know.
Okay.
Because, it's a pretty frequent conversation that like, oh, the music business is fucked up, it's falling apart, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of go, yeah, but there's some people out there that have figured out how to do it right.
Right.
And then people go, what do you mean?
Right.
Because that's counter to everything you read.
Right.
And I go, well, my buddy Dave, right? And he's, I tell the story, which may not be true, but I have the sense that like none of your records lose money.
They all recoup at one point. It might take a couple of years,
sure.
But yeah, we try to make sure that whatever we spend, we get a return. Yeah. On everything. Yeah. I mean, that's where, well, we're talking about our current situation.
Well, I'm just talking in general. Like that's the sense I get, and it doesn't really matter whether it's totally true.
Going back to the 90s, that's also true. Yeah. Probably even more so then.
Yeah. And that's just unheard of, right? Like, it's not.
It's a matter of understanding your region and demographic, and that's how I was able to kind of pinpoint an area in the industry that people weren't focusing on. That was developing independent labels. Yeah. Prior to the early 90s, it was majors or nothing. Mm-hmm. And
which is funny, right? Because rap basically started with independent labels. Like, there were no majors.
There was no support. I don't even know if there were labels at the time. I've never studied like what actually happened with Kool Herc and his music and who put that out on the East Coast, but there was definitely more of a major label involvement on the East Coast because it started there. Whereas on the West Coast there was no infrastructure. There was none of the roots that folks had in New York didn't really exist out here, and then the Bay Area kind of took that on. Absolutely. And that's what to me was the epicenter of independent labels doing it on their own. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time, doing sales for Priority Records and meeting these labels and meeting these artists and trying to figure out how they were doing what they were doing without the help of a big distributor, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm reading Darlene's book right now, Ice-T's First Wife.
Yeah,
it's a great
like
book.
to read that. Yeah.
It's great. Definition of Down. She's coming on the show.
Is she? You gotta tell her I said hi.
I will. So it's a great book, but she talks about meeting Ice. And, you know, at the time he was riding the bus to get to her house. Like, he had no car, and he was trying to make it as a rapper. And they end up having to move to New York to get a label, right? Because, you know, there's no labels out here at the time. And the labels that were here weren't messing with what he was doing.
Right.
And so, yeah, so, you know, like you're saying, there's no infrastructure for this kind of music at that point.
And how it happened was even an accident out here, which folks
what do you mean?
don't. That, you know, if you want to say that Priority Records was one of the, I mean, it would be on the West Coast, Priority Records was really the only one holding it down. And they didn't set out to put out hip hop.
Right.
I still haven't seen Straight Outta Compton.
Oh, you haven't seen it yet?
No. So I don't know what was covered in that film, but the owners of Priority came from K-Tel Records.
Yeah.
And that was a compilation label that did everything. Country's Greatest
It was the
Hits.
label that if you're watching cartoons
That's
in the
right.
afternoon, all of a sudden a commercial comes on, and it was like K-Tel Greatest whatever.
Right.
Something.
Country's Greatest, Rock the 80s. And so the two guys from Priority Records left K-Tel, opened Priority Records, and then NWA kind of fell in their lap. And no one else would touch it.
Right.
But they had the money, and they just had a big run with the California Raisin success, which ultimately financed everything they could do with NWA.
Yeah.
But they didn't even know what they were doing with NWA. They
Sure.
knew that there was something interesting happening, but I started there in 91 at 19 in the mailroom, and when I came in, which was exciting for me because I was the big fan, it turned out I was the only one that understood the music
right?
when I got there. So when I'm showing up at what I consider to be the, you know, the motherland of what I loved and listened to, I walked in to meet, you know, hoping to meet people that would blow my mind, and they were working on compilations. And they would look at me and go, "Wait, you understand this record? And you understood what he meant? What did he mean there?" And I was shocked. I was like, this is so backwards from what I expected it to be, and that obviously worked to my advantage because I was able to focus on areas of development that they weren't even tuned into at the time.
Sure. So just something you said, working in the mailroom, like, and you know, this is a town where the mailroom is an important job, right? Like a lot of really
Look at
influential
Endeavor.
Look
Look
Absolutely.
at ICM. Their mailroom is full of lawyers.
Right. Exactly. And CA and William Morris, right? Like, you know, I think Mike Ovitz started in the mailroom at William Morris before he launched CAA, right? Like, so that's a big job, or it's a big gateway.
It's the place to get the well-rounded.
Are there even
education.
mailrooms anymore?
I think that, I mean, I don't know, not like I had it. I mean, I got to work in every department, you know. It was a small, I think it depends on the size of the company.
Sure.
You know, if it's a 50-person company, yes. If it's a, you know, 1,500 person, then it's its own building to distribute mail. But with
I'm
my
just saying,
experience,
I just like with there's so much less mail now. And mail is, I mean, it sounds like a weird thing, right? But
yeah, I never looked at it like that.
Right,
that's a
but
good
like
point.
everything, you know, I didn't start in the mailroom. I was an intern, but one of my jobs at Motown as an intern was sorting the demos that came in from the mailroom guy, right? They just came to me, and I had to throw most of them in the trash and do something else with the rest. But like that doesn't happen.
Not like, no, from the demo standpoint, that's correct.
Right.
It'd be funny to get a cassette demo at this point. And,
sure.
You know, but you're right.
So what does that mean now for people to start out? Like if that's not an entry point.
I mean, it still has to be. There's still going to be some movement. It's just going to change in terms of what it is and the advantage. I mean, for example, at Strange, the amount of merch that we ship in and out. I mean, a third of our staff is dealing with with shipments. We'll ship 5,000 packages a day out of our warehouse and our compound, filling orders when we have a strange sale or something like that. So
Yeah.
I just think the scope of work has changed, but at the end of the day, the benefit of working in the mailroom, starting in the mailroom at any company, if you're able to get out of the mailroom and walk around and actually deliver the mail, you get to see what each department does. And when you're green and you're fresh out of school, and you don't know what a publicist does, and you don't know what a social networking manager does, and you don't know what these fields are, it gives you the opportunity to understand what they do and help you figure out what's interesting to you, what you want to, progress with and put your energy into. That's what I learned from it.
Sure.
So, and what happened with me was there was an opening in the sales department after the mailroom. So I was able to go into sales, which put me on the West Coast at the height of, West Coast gangster rap. Yeah. This was 92. And
so what records were you working? Your
I think the first record I sold was Death Certificate.
Okay.
But I was there I came in after America's Most Wanted, and I was there when 100 Miles and Running came out, and then Kill It Will, and then Death Certificate were the first few records. But first one I sold, and that was its own issue, because the amount of controversy that went around Death Certificate, and we had people picketing the building, and we had the Guardian Angels that still probably patrol this area. Yeah. Standing out in front of the CNN building and stopping us from going into the building, and Simon Wiesenthal, they felt that Cube attacked the entire Jewish, population here in LA, and so it was a lot to take for a guy who's just, what am I selling? What am I putting out there? Am I doing the right thing, the wrong thing? I'm a fan. Was
that going through your mind at the time?
Yeah, and then you especially get to know Vaseline, and people are gonna there's gonna potentially be bloodshed, and so I was torn because I loved it, being a young kid who was into NWA, but I also knew that I was working with something that was powerful, that you could look back on 20 years later and launch whatever university classes off any one of those albums.
Right.
So did you know? I know this is, you'd gone to college, dropped out, right?
I went year and a half, dropped out.
So did you know before that you wanted to be in music?
No.
Or when did music become a part of your life?
I was always just big on, at 5 years old, putting a stereo together, and at 10, so it was always about the sound. And
what were
my first car, it was all speakers.
Yeah, sure.
House speakers and a station wagon, with 4 amps stacked on top of each other. So
and what kind of music back then were you listening to?
Hip hop.
So do you remember the first?
I mean, Beastie Boys really
had,
you? Because of my buddy Jeff Katz, Beastie Boys really had an impact on my, I guess, beginning to fall in love with hip hop, and the balance of what they did, and still to this day can't be done as well as they did it back then. KRS-One, Boogie Down, those were probably some of my earlier, and then obviously everything West Coast related, NWA and everything that was going on there. I mean, that was ditch school to go get that record on street day.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then meet in the parking lot and put my speakers on the roof of the station wagon and bang it for everybody that was in school while we were out partying in the lot.
That's awesome.
So
that's great.
So then when I went to college, I knew I'd be in business, and I did a year and a half and wasn't into it. I wasn't focused. Felt like I was taking advantage of an opportunity, or not taking advantage of a great opportunity. So let me put that on hold, since I had the luxury of being able to go, and went to my folks and told them that I don't want to just do it because it's what I'm supposed to do. I want to do it when I know what I want to do. So they supported me dropping out, and this was December of 91. And the reason that was kind of interesting is the Gulf War was starting. And you don't drop out of college. They were talking about a draft.
Right,
right.
It was the first time the word draft had come up in our lifetime. All I heard was, "You're nuts, don't drop out of school." And I did. And then I remember on my first day at work at Priority was January 14th, 92. Or wait, Now I'm mixing it up. So yeah, it would have been January 24th, 91.
Okay.
I dropped out in 90 then. I had that year wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was answering the phones for the receptionist, Clinton announced that the Gulf War was underway. It was when we declared war. And now I was feeling a little more secure since I was employed, because that's when you need to be in school or employed.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was all. That's how it started for me. And then it was just
I don't think I
chaos
knew
from
that
there
you
on
could
out.
just have a job, because that might have taken. I might have thought about things differently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would have dropped out of school, but I definitely thought about it from time to time.
Did you? Like the whole draft thing crossed your mind?
Well, I knew I didn't really love going to college,
Right.
and so my answer was, I'm just going to do whatever I can to get out, get my degree and get out as fast as I can. So I kind of did that, and I got into music business along the way. But yeah, once in a while, as I'm like, fuck this, I can't, this isn't
doing this?
Why am I doing
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Like, maybe I'll just drop out. And so it wasn't like a big conversation I had with myself, but there was somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, well, there might be a draft going on, and I should probably,
Yeah.
stay in school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we were doing our research on you,
Yeah.
we do a lot of research.
These guys know everything about you.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind was going against the grain. And so
Okay.
I'm sure,
Well, that's come up already.
right? So I'm sure people calling you crazy wasn't the first time when you did that, when you made that decision, right?
No, I've always been a little.
A rebel.
I was meeting with somebody yesterday, and they were asking me about what it would take to get me to work in a major label system, and I said I couldn't.
Yeah.
That my DNA won't allow me
Right.
to, if I see a flaw or a problem or even something shady or corrupt, I gotta make it right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that approach won't work in corporate America.
So
It's
where?
pretty tough in the music business, period. Isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. For me to do my job, I need a boss that has the same goals and etiquette and everything. We have to see eye to eye, because I won't follow direction if it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah. So where did that value come from? Like, when did you know you had these standards?
Go ahead.
No, that's the question.
I mean, I guess just how I was raised. There's right and there's wrong, and if something's wrong, you try to make it right. And I ran into a lot of problems at Priority because I was loyal to my artists. And when there was, and I'm not saying that there was shady activity at Priority, but questionable in regards to accounting and creative accounting, like most entertainment. But yeah, I would get a call from one of my artists that went gold and saying that he didn't understand why he's not seeing any money, and I'd go talk to my boss, and they'd say, don't worry about it, and I'd say, fuck that. And I'd go into accounting, and I'd go into the filing cabinets, and I'd pull out the files, and I'd start doing my own accounting, and then I'd go back and say, that's a mistake, and my artist needs a $180,000 check. And there were people at Priority that appreciated that.
Right.
Unfortunately, the person that appreciated that had a stroke, and that was one of the two owners that was ignored in the movie Straight Outta Compton. There's Brian Turner, and there's Mark Cerami. And Mark was the loyal, righteous, honest businessman, and everything the opposite for his partner Brian, which was portrayed in Straight Outta Compton. So Mark would support doing the right thing, and whenever Mark wasn't around, and which happened which became permanent after his stroke, it was a disaster for me.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it was all bad at that point. So it's easier to do what you're told. It's easier to fall in line and say, all right, that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. But you can either some folks are bred for that and some aren't. But when and how, I don't really know. I think it's just how you're raised kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like the music business is full of that, right? That, you mentioned creative accounting. I think there's always been this, all this gray area.
Well, no one understands it.
Right.
Like, the artists don't understand it, their managers don't understand it, and half the time the lawyers don't understand it.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is the accounting, how the money flows, what it means, what's the difference between a joint venture and a production deal, and an artist royalty deal, and a profit split deal. They're all so different.
Right.
And I mean, I can go years and years without running into somebody who challenges any one of those questions.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I sign an artist, I lay it out for him. And I explained to him that, you know, in today's climate, I'm signing you and you're signing an artist royalty deal, and you're not going to see any money from this for a while. There's a whole recouping process. I advise you to educate yourself and learn it, read it, understand it. But at the end of the day, you're going to make your money touring, selling merch, and the album sales are going to feed your touring and your merch. So it's very important to me that when I sign a new artist in today's climate, that they understand that. I don't think anybody else says that.
Yeah,
you're not going to see a check. You're not going to see a royalty unless you go gold or platinum, which is like winning the lottery in 2015.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you're going to recoup on your next record, and might even be your third record. But eventually it will recoup and the checks will start rolling, but you can't count on that now.
And I wonder what the business would be like if that was the conversation that every label was having with every artist.
I agree. And it's so complicated that literally I think we could take 20 artists, major label artists, and sit them down and ask them to explain the accounting process of their money. Tell us how your money flows, and you're not going to find one that can actually explain it.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a weird, because as I go back to being an honest guy in entertainment, I'm identifying areas and showing my artists this is really what you should look at. But then, for the few people who figured it out, that come back and go, explain to me how labels can justify an artist royalty deal, because they are, in theory, they're in favor of the label.
Sure.
But what's not being taken into consideration is that they're trying to recoup their 9 other losses off your one success. So the accounting has to be so upside down, since it's such a volatile business, and you're going to miss so many times, that on the one that you hit, it's got to recoup the other record. So an artist gets caught up in a bigger model of business that makes sense. You know, so when I ask myself, or someone asks me how you sleep at night, which you could when it comes to people not understanding record royalty accounting, that's the bottom line. It's my job to keep the record company owner interested in staying in the business.
Yeah.
And if we're losing on every record and we're not recouping off of one that helped the other records come along, he's retired, the label's gone, and we're all looking for something else to do. So it's an interesting balance is what I'm trying to say.
So I want to, before we go back to your story, teach us how to do that.
To do what?
How do you run a label that doesn't take a loss on 9 out of 10 records?
Well, that's a big question. And when I say a loss, I mean in that time frame.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because every record should recoup if you do it right. So in that accounting, that 12-month accounting cycle, you could say that several records are taking a loss. But, I mean, the way I do it is, and it's the way everybody's doing it nowadays, is by letting the artist do the hard work and show and prove that they are connecting with their fan base. Because you might be Kendrick Lamar in 1995 and no one cared because you weren't gangster enough in 1995. Talent might have been the same.
Yeah.
So it's the stars lining up when it comes to the right time, the right place, the right skill set. So having a real finger on the pulse of what's happening, and it doesn't have to be national, it can be regional. And that's how I built my career in the 90s, was finding something that was happening regionally and making the decision, is it going to stay regional or does it have mass appeal? What'll it mean to the rest of the country? Especially with like a No Limit, where, you know, he's doing music that the Midwest and the East, and I mean, most of the country couldn't even understand what they were saying. So is that regional or is that national? You know,
Right.
once I thought I had it all figured out, it was out the window and it was national. So
Yeah. So is that just gut feeling, or is there more to it than how do you look at somebody and say, you know, this guy's got the potential to be national? Or
okay, what I've learned, and it's probably the most important part of what I've based my career on, is focusing on the business people around the talent. There's
Okay.
talent everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's an artist. Everyone's a musician. Everyone can rap. It's not an anomaly anymore that you know someone that's a rapper.
Right.
And a lot of them are good.
Yeah.
But what there's very few of is quality businessmen in entertainment. You know, if you're a businessman and you're trying to figure out what route you're going to go, you're probably not choosing entertainment. You're not choosing the restaurant business.
Right.
You're not choosing the print media business. You're
Yeah.
not choosing the record or entertainment
No,
industry.
you're doing like sanitation. Or
You're
some
leaving
shit.
all those volatile, crazy industries alone because that's what they are.
Yeah.
So what I learned from when I signed No Limit, Master P's label, and I signed another label that I know you're familiar with, JT the Bigafiga.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Get
What
Low
was-
Records.
Get low.
Yeah,
That's right.
Straight out the lab, Get
Yep.
Low Records. So I signed them both at the same time, and I would have put my money on JT because he, to me, was a more talented artist.
Yeah.
And had hits and had game recognized game.
Was that the first? Was that the first single? No, there was the one before that.
That might have even been before my time because I came in on game recognized game.
Right. Yeah, because he
But
was
he'd
from my
been
neighborhood.
going.
He had like a local hit, just in San Francisco.
Right.
That I think then you picked up, and then put out Game Recognized Game.
No, game recognized game happened before me.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what got my attention.
Okay.
And I signed them both, and I was concerned because of the regional sound that P had, and he was in there was a lot of he got ran out of the Bay Area essentially because he was from the South, but he moved to Vallejo, and I think it was Vallejo, and you know, got into some beef with other Bay Area artists, and people considered him someone that was maybe taking some of their music and sound. So it got violent for him. That was around the time that I signed him, and JT put a record out, and P put a record out, and JT didn't market, promote, and do what he had to do on his record, and P went balls to the wall, and that's when I learned. It's not about the artist. It's about the man behind the artist. And that still applies to this day with my role at Strange because Tech N9ne is an undisputed talent. You might not feel what he's rapping about, but no one disputes his talent. And his career was a disaster until he met Travis.
Yeah.
You know, he had 5 managers, 2 different label deals, stuck at Quest, stuck at Midwest Side. Sway and Tech were managing him. Nothing was happening. No record was coming out. And then Travis got involved and cleaned everything up, streamlined it, recorded, and that's when I got involved, and together we built.
Yeah, so I always had the sense of Tech because I knew him, you know, I think I met him through Quincy.
Right.
And I always had the sense of he's like trying to fit into the system that's not built for a guy like him.
Another way of putting it is he couldn't fit into the system and didn't care, but wouldn't change to accommodate what the system wanted.
Sure.
You know? And so every label he was signed to before Strange, which was Perspective Records in the early 90s, which is Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis,
right.
during Janet's heyday.
Yeah.
And that folded. They signed Tech, and that folded before he put a record out. And then Quincy Jones signed him to Quest, and the same thing happened. Quest folded before his record came out.
Yeah.
And then that's when, and Travis met Tech just because they're from the same hometown. He's the hometown hero. Travis was doing a clothing line and wanted local celebrities to wear his line. And so when they got to talking, it was, dude, how are you not doing more than, how come I'm not hearing you on the radio? Where's your album? What's going on? And when Travis heard what a mess it was, he walked away. But it just ate away at him.
So explain for folks listening who might not know, because we still don't hear Tech N9ne on the radio.
No, that changed this year.
Okay.
You know, we've
Fair
had
enough.
2 or 3 top 10 singles now on radio.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hood Go Crazy was
Okay.
this year's.
Oh yeah, I
All right.
quoted that to some friends one night.
Is that right?
Fragile and Hood Go Crazy were.
Okay.
But it's been
But-
14 years of no
Right.
support at radio.
So,
Hell, I'm a hypocrite, but go on.
Yeah.
I'll address that later.
well, so what I want, give us some perspective on how big is Tech N9ne? For those who maybe heard this one song or never heard him on the radio.
I mean,
How big is that business?
I mean, you know, you can read about it in Forbes.
Yeah.
You know, he's one of the Cash Kings, and it's not coming from all the same revenue streams that, you know, his peers are getting their money from.
Right.
We're just hardworking, man. You
Yeah.
know, we've sold, I don't know if we're over 3 million records on Tech, all independent,
Wow.
and we've cut out the middleman everywhere we can. We're building our 3rd compound as we speak to do all our own in-house manufacturing for merch, all our own screen printing. So really all that we farm out right now is manufacturing and distribution. Everything else is
of
done.
hard goods.
Of the actual product,
yeah.
of the CDs.
Yeah.
But otherwise everything's done in-house. And I think the best way to answer your question is to go back to, and I don't know if I've ever told you this story or if you ever saw it. Billboard magazine did a big feature on Strange in like 2010. It was a big look for us. It brought us to corporate. You know, we got some first corporate press, and it was about how you started this interview with the record industry's in shambles and the landscape is gone and it's all bad. But then there's this label, Strange Music, who seems to be growing and doing well. And they flew out and took photos of our facility, and it was a big, like 4, 5, 6-page spread in Billboard. And then a professor at Berklee School of Music. Did I ever tell you this story? No. A professor at Berklee School of Music saw the article and was fascinated by it, and then went on to write his own article about the Billboard article. So he reviewed the Billboard article and then put this up, and what it was what's so interesting about Strange Music and their success is really nothing that interesting. We just brought the traditional basic fundamentals of business to entertainment. So here we are in Hollywood sitting in a space that we wouldn't be able to afford.
Sure.
Or you know, we could afford it, but not for long.
Yeah.
We're out in the Midwest. We're in Missouri. We couldn't afford the parking lot in L.A. for a fleet of 32 vehicles.
Yeah,
Seriously.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be
It's like
quarter of
100.
this block. What's that?
It's like 100 per car per month.
We have 32 vehicles, and 7 of them are box trucks. 2 of them are semis. 3 of them are,
Yeah, it would be
you know,
crazy.
40-foot trailers. Like, so the bottom line about this article was that he said what Strange Music has done successfully is if they spend $1, they're going to see 2 in return. And whatever their cost, they're going to sign an artist, they're going to put out the record. And so we keep a low overhead. We focus on our bottom line. We try to make decisions that make sense. We respect $50 like we do $5,000 and make decisions the same. Sometimes that's frustrating for the artist who can't understand why we're holding off overnighting a package. Because it would make their life that much easier to get it tomorrow, but we're tired of that $32,000 FedEx bill every month that we need to get down. You know, so we micromanage every aspect of the way the cash moves, but we do it successfully, and that all comes down from Travis, and I've learned from him on how to do that myself. You know,
Is there any room for creativity when you're micromanaging money so tightly?
It is it's a very interesting proposition to try to figure out what the budget is for art.
Right.
You know, like what does that project deserve, and and why does this guy get this budget and that guy get that budget? So, yeah, and it is, but at the same time, I'm very transparent with. We have a roster of 12, and I'm very transparent with all of them. And when they ask those questions, I'm able to explain to them what does differ and why this budget applied to this artist and why it doesn't apply to you. And then there's we've got this great song and no budget applies, but we want to present this art, and that's when we sit down and decide what we're comfortable with. So yeah, it's very hard to look an artist in the eye and say that I know you want a $10,000 video to get all the bells and whistles, but we're going to have to cut those bells and whistles. It's going to be half the video you want, and this is why. And hopefully you're going to be able to understand it when you get your statement, because we sit down and go through the statement, and they're able to look at every nickel and dime and how it was spent. And that's when they go, man, I appreciate that this wasn't that. And I remember when we were in New York and you said, let's not get that limo and let's just walk. And all those little things that add up when they're looking at their statement going, how did this happen?
Right.
That's when they appreciate it.
Wow.
Well, I think, that seems so obvious, right?
Right.
But it's also so counter to the way that so much of this business runs. And even in the sense of, I heard an interview with E40 recently, with Ali Shaheed Muhammad.
Okay.
And he was talking about how, and 40 arguably is one of the great businessmen.
Absolutely.
Right, in this business. And, but, he was talking about how.
Even better than you may know if you're not up on Earl Stevens' selections, his wine line.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just giving you that.
I love that. I love that.
Earl Stevens selections.
And I even love it more having sat with him at a wedding with a jug of Carlo Rossi under the table.
Yeah.
That, he was pouring for the table.
Yeah.
The fact that he's gone into wine is incredible.
And he's the number one selling brand in Costco.
Yeah.
And Ralph's
Oh
and
my
everything
gosh.
else.
But he talked about how, back in the day they would buy the back cover of the Source. And he sort of talked about how it wasn't so much a business decision, but it was about flexing. Right? And it was about, and he likened it to now it's buying World Star, a homepage takeover on World Star, or
in terms of it being the statement or the look, because they do both. You know what I mean? It's a statement and
absolutely.
It's a look.
Yeah, and so exactly, and I think there's both, right? But those things get combined sometimes.
Right.
Is right like that. On the one hand, I think what he was saying is, on the one hand, there's a sense of you've earned it. Like, so you gotta, you get to live that a little bit, which is kind of, I could see people saying, the limo ride is part of.
Right. You got to pull up.
Right. It's part of the perks.
Right.
Right. And B, you have to put on a certain image, or people feel compelled to do that, right? That I have to show up at a certain level that, I'm going to maybe be taken more seriously, or, things like that. And I think, those are very real conversations and real emotions that people go through in, especially, people who scrape their way up from nothing. And, every inch is a battle, right? And then, I see that happening to people where you feel like you earned this, you deserve it.
Right.
And the balance of that is what you're saying is looking at the statement.
Right.
And saying, well, why is there no money in my account?
Right. Because that perk doesn't mean anything if you're upside down when it's time to collect the check.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the industry as a whole has gone away. And think about how we were in the 90s with Office Space and flying
Ridiculous.
business class everywhere. And, and now I could count the friends in offices on one hand. Everybody's working from home offices.
Yeah.
Right.
People aren't tripping on what you drive. That's, let me touch on that. The 90s were great, and it was a blast and surreal, and had the time of my life. But it also attracted a very shady element of con individuals into the music, and $250,000 checks were flying every which way to all the wrong people in the 90s, while the honest guys were just working away. And it was discouraging, Josh and I know plenty of people that are on Easy Street for all the wrong reasons, while, we work hard and continue to do what we do. And what I love so much about today's climate, when people ask the pros and the cons, how can you survive in today's climate, and what do you enjoy about it, and so forth, it's pure. The people doing it now are doing it because they love it, and it's what they do, and they want to contribute to music, because the money's not big. You're lucky to get a check, let alone be able to live off that check.
Right.
So I'm enjoying it. While other people think there is no industry. The thing that people miss all the time is that music's never going to stop. It's just how you consume it, and if you pay for it. And if you don't pay for it, then where along the line are you willing to pay for that concert experience or that shirt or whatever the case may be? So, I put a real positive spin on where I think the industry is right now.
Right.
And the fact that, it's funny to me when I hear now independent, the new independent.
Right,
like everything's independent.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been independent. In my 25 years of doing this, it's only been independent. But no one, I remember in the early 2000s, folks would, man, fuck a major. I'd never sign with a major. And then next week you read, so-and-so signed, $1.5 million deal, and you get them on the phone, man, I had to take that check. And, so everyone would talk the shit, but then when it came to actually getting the offer, they would jump at it.
Right.
Now, not so much. Now it's really, people have really come to the realization that, all right, there's so much good happening in independent, you got to tell me why I'm going to give that up to go with a major.
Right. So how much of you signing, or let me think how to word this question, but because you operate against the traditional way,
right?
Is it harder to sign talent, or is it harder to kind of onboard talent to kind of get them to think differently? Like, what's that process for you?
I mean, it's really just kind of worked in our favor based on the health and well-being of the company.
Right.
So our reputation is so solid. We're not the biggest. We don't have, the biggest selling artist in hip hop, but we have a reputation for doing good business.
Right.
And you can choose to edit this or not. To me, because it's somewhat of a diss to most of the hip hop and urban side of the industry, business is done so poorly in hip hop. It's given such a black eye and raised the bar so low, lowered the bar, that for a professional, hardworking label in hip hop to come along who pays their bills and the check's in the mail, and Dave said he's going to call you tomorrow and he does.
Right.
That carries that's worth more than anything that I can speak on.
Right.
So folks want to, Grammy award-winning producers that are collecting $40,000, $50,000 checks per beat with a major label will call us up and say, I just want to be a part of what you guys are doing.
Right.
I know you guys don't pay 50 racks for a beat, but I want to work with you, so maybe we can find a way to work with 5. So we get approached, the artists, the producers, and it's a beautiful thing because it wasn't like that 10 years ago.
Right.
What
Did that answer the question?
Well, yeah, and then I was just wondering, like, was there ever that point where you really had to push for the way you guys viewed the music?
Absolutely, because we'd be competing with a major versus what we had to offer. But a lot of times, like, let's use J-Rock on Warner Brothers, TDE. They were dead, completely dead, stuck, couldn't move, and jammed up at Warner Brothers. They were setting up J-Rock's record. He had a single called All My Life featuring Lil Wayne and will.i.am. And it was on its way. It was at 900 spins at radio. And the whole regime changed at Warner Brothers. Todd Moskowitz came in. New folks came in and took over the urban division and shelved J-Rock right in the beginning of this campaign. So our publicist was working, a publicist that worked at Warner Brothers that I'm good friends with, that also helps us at Strange, was telling us what was going on with J-Rock. He's stuck. He can't put a record out. It's done. It's featuring a who's who. But it didn't fit Todd Moskowitz's model. It wasn't Waka. It wasn't Gucci. It wasn't what they were working on at the time. So here's an example where you've got a major label artist that's got a sizable buzz, who can't wait to get off.
Right.
And we come along and introduce ourselves as someone that can take that record, give you a date, tell you when it's going to come out,
Right.
tell you when we're going to shoot the videos. And that all happened. And that's the way it went. And they got released from Warner. And we put out the first J-Rock record. And then we all shook hands. And TD went on to become, you know, the huge force that they are today.
Yeah.
So that's an example of it's usually easier than you would expect. Because at the end of the day, I've got a reputation that when you go out and do your homework on, you know, on anybody, like same with Josh, the few good people in the industry that you can go out and talk to 10 people and only hear 10 good things from,
Right.
that's golden. And that can mean more than a whole company.
Right.
If that person
Sure.
has that kind of reputation. So, you know, it's just really been a combination of all of those in terms of getting people's interest. So if they're not interested and they're not even really looking at what we have to do, I try to get together with them. I just did this actually last week. I'll say who it was with. There's a kid named Afro.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
And everybody's going after him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on Ellen, I think, you know, just because he's a big guy. He's not what you expect. He was a bullied kid that sat and stayed home and read the dictionary.
Wow.
And studied the dictionary to the point that was actually his punishment, he said.
Wow.
Which turned into a blessing because he learned a
Right.
vocabulary that
Parents?
now allows him.
Pay
There you
attention
go.
to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, supernatural.
Supernat. There it is. Supernatural. So he's the first guy, and
Yeah.
you know he's a legend, and props to him. But then comes Afro, this 17-year-old kid who's doing the same thing, where he went up and freestyled on YouTube, and people didn't believe it. So he came back, and you know people were handing him shoes and this and that, and he was freestyling, and the kid's a phenom. I mean, there's no doubt what this kid's gonna do, and if he's the next Biggie on that level, right?
Wow.
So I met with him, and all I wanted to do was introduce myself and spend a few minutes with him, and not even tell him that I'm trying to sign you as much as I want you to get to know me and me to get to know you. And while you're in your process of figuring out what works and doesn't work, if you have any questions, try to build a rapport and a relationship.
Right.
And that goes further than most meetings, you know, because when you're taking
Sure.
the approach that, you know, I'm really not here with an agenda, that's very appealing to talent, is for them to go, all right, that dude really didn't have an agenda. That
Right.
fucked me up.
Right.
I feel like maybe I can call that guy and run an idea by him.
Yeah.
And he'll give me the truth.
Right.
You know?
That's amazing. I mean, having been in those meetings, that's the opposite of every other meeting that this kid is having.
You're right.
Right.
And he was tripped out by it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And Afro was like, I mean, not Afro, RA, who was there with him, was like, nah, for real. We're just eating breakfast, man.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, that's my approach. If it's somebody that I'm interested in that's got every major on them, I'm not going to go in there and try to compete with advances.
Yeah, you know your place. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So I want to go back a little bit. You're out doing sales. You're out in the field. You meet Master P. You see him doing his thing. You bring him into the label, or to distribution, right?
Right.
And that's kind of your first discovery for the company.
Right.
And you know, for anyone who doesn't remember, you know, Master P was a force. I think most people in the hip hop community, most people didn't really take him seriously as a rapper.
Right.
But his shit was just he
Took
couldn't not sell records.
We were doing 200 million.
Yeah.
Literally, like he eclipsed Priority at one point.
I mean, it
to
was
watch
out of control.
No Limit get bigger than Priority was like a stop everything moment. You know?
Absolutely. And I still remember, if there's any collectors out there, they were one of the first to do the opaque covers.
Yeah.
Right, because the jewel cases were all, you know, these see-through plastic, and he would do these like really elaborate different colors. I kept all of them.
Right.
Really just for the artwork.
Still have them?
Yeah, I have them somewhere.
Yeah. So does Travis.
Yeah. No, it was such a cool thing. So, you know, you would think that you're making this company a lot of money. You would think that they would just love you for that.
Are you talking No Limit or Priority?
Priority.
Yeah.
But I know it wasn't quite so smooth.
Well, it goes back to that boss with the stroke.
Yeah.
So it was smooth until 50% of the decision maker, was removed from his post.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian was Brian's role at the company was A&R.
Mm-hmm.
Mark's role at the company was sales and distribution. So when I was doing sales in Oakland and Bay Area, and Master P walked up to me in the parking lot with his mouth full of gold and, bruh, I'm going to be number 25 next week on the charts. And I'm like, what? Who are you?
Right.
And then we got to talking, and he gave me the disc, and he was 26 the following week on the charts. And because of that, I walked into Mark's office and said, I'm kicking it with Short, I'm kicking it with 40 and the Click, Dre Dog, and all these Bay Area artists that let me back up. We were the only independent label in history, to my knowledge, that had their own distribution.
Right.
No one had ever done that before. And that's because they were sales guys that left K-Tel
Mm-hmm.
that opened Priority. And at the time it was SEMA, which was Capital, EMI. They collected, shipped, but we did the sales. So
Mm-hmm.
we were able to collect the orders, or take the orders, hand them over to Capital, and through that, the distribution opportunity became for not only just signing an artist, but signing these labels.
Mm-hmm.
So when this was presented to Mark, when I explained to Mark that why aren't we signing labels and using our pipeline, our distribution stream for these labels, he was like, great idea. I don't know why we wouldn't be doing that. So he walked down to his partner's office, Brian, and said, hey, I got a sales guy who wants to sign up some of these Bay Area labels. And he said, no. He said, that's what I do. I sign artists. You do sales. Go back to doing sales. They had a disagreement. I never knew about this disagreement.
Sure.
Not for 12 years.
Wow.
Wow.
So so Mark comes back to me and says, green light, go, sign. So I don't know that he just went against his partner's wishes of not to do that. And so now I've got an enemy. An enemy that I never understood why. So I'm making piles of money, and he's pissed off at me all the time for years and years and years.
Mm.
And it was in 2002 when, after Mark had kind of recovered from the stroke, when he explained to me what the truth was behind Brian's animosity towards me, and that it all stemmed from that meeting back in 1992. But even more interesting than all that is that an ego so big can't get over that.
Yeah, because it's his money.
He put $100 million in his pocket as a direct result of my efforts.
Yeah.
Because they sold the first half of the company when they were desperate because business was declining and NWA was gone and things were starting to go the wrong way, and then No Limit blew up. And No Limit, so the first half sold before No Limit for like 50 or 70 million, and then the second half sold for double or triple because of the value of No Limit.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's an ego for you if you can't get past a meeting 10 years ago that you'd be happy to make that mistake.
That made you $100 million.
Yeah,
Why
I would think so.
Why didn't you ever leave? I mean, I may have missed this in the research if it happened, but it would make. It seems to me it'd be obvious, like facilitating Master P to do all of that. Did you join?
No Limit?
Yeah.
That's I guess a good question. It got so toxic after Mark had his stroke. And basically I was removed from my post. And my assistant, his name's Duffy, he ended up taking up a lot of my workload while I was in the harassment seat. I was under contract, and as soon as Mark wasn't there to preserve my department, because we were a 4-person department in a 200-person company doing more billing than the other 196 combined.
That's crazy.
So Mark, we were untouchable. And as soon as he woke up and couldn't tie his shoes and went in to deal with years of rehabilitation, I don't know how to even present it, but I was straight, taken out of my office. You know, I was harassed. They tried to
Right.
do everything they could to run me out of the company. So, which eventually ended up happening.
Right, but that it's so hard for me to understand looking from the outside and not
Okay.
knowing the emotions everyone's like kind of going through. But it seems like when you're billing that much, it's almost like you would have to say, "Try to remove me from here."
And
Like, how come did that
Well,
happen?
Well, because he's under contract. He can't go work somewhere else.
Oh, right. I know, but I mean, I just feel like in a situation like that, like
There-
nobody can
there was a
fight the
period- I see
obvious.
what you're getting at. There was a period where that was the case, and I was untouchable, and
Right.
P was so loyal to what we did. But when Mark got and P was also loyal to Mark.
Yeah.
And when Mark and I don't write the checks. Mark or Brian write the checks. So as soon as Mark was sick and removed, P had to find a way. In other words, if he only sided with me and was like, "Fuck that, I'm rolling
he's
with
under-
Dave,"
he's under
he just
contract
cut
too.
himself
Right.
with Brian. So he did what he had to do for the well-being of No Limit. And the funny thing about that is Brian was actually doing something that would have terminated his relationship with No Limit. And I don't know if this has ever been said before, but Brian was trying to sign Cash Money
Right.
while No Limit was still at Priority. Brian called me into
And
his
they
office.
had, and those guys had beef,
Oh, big beef.
like street beef.
Yeah, project beef.
Yeah.
You know, and it had already been made clear to me what'll happen if there's ever a confrontation between Cash Money and No Limit.
Which is
So-
interesting because, you know, they had NWA and Ice Cube when they were at odds, right? They had a piece of the Chronic
right?
so Priority was no stranger to its artists having beef with each other.
Yeah, but they also saw how it ended.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
they lost all
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah.
And since No Limit was doing $200 million at the time, that Brian was looking at Cash Money, here's where I come in and go, "Are you nuts?
Yeah.
Are you really going to shoot yourself in the foot with your breadwinner
Right.
to take on?" And of course, Cash Money dethroned No Limit, the new improved No Limit, and they went on to do incredible things. But that was all handled horribly on our end.
Right.
And that just is an example of what Brian's decision making was versus a guy like Mark, who I was under, who would say, "We're loyal to P. They're not allowed. Even if they would have wanted to take a meeting with us, we wouldn't have,
Right.
out of respect to P." Whereas Brian's like, "Let's buy the 11th floor and we'll secretly distribute cash." He literally said that.
Right.
Wow.
That we'll just make it a secret. We'll put him on the 11th floor, and P will never know about it.
Right.
And I said, "You don't get it. You don't." And he's like, I said, "You don't get it, and that's why you have a cop living in your house." And he just,
I was just gonna ask.
yeah, he had
beef,
he had
like,
LAPD
seems so
security
scary.
living in his house.
That's crazy.
And when the shit hit the fan in my world, which might be another interview, and I went into Brian and asked for 50 cents on the dollar. I quit after some violent things happened, and he wouldn't do it. That's the weird part, is that after all these years of trying to get me to go,
Right.
now I'm saying I'm out.
I
Give me
need it.
50 cents on the dollar. He wouldn't let me leave, and said, "We'll just send home a cop with you to live at your house, and your family will be safe." Wow. And I said, "That's the point, Brian. I don't
Like,
want a fucking cop
Yeah.
in my house. I don't do bad business. I don't
Right.
shit on people, and I don't lie. So I shouldn't have to have this security system that you've taken on. That's your problem. That's your world. That's why I need to be out."
Yeah.
God, they don't train you for that in business school.
No, there's no.
No, I'm like serious. You know, you're like
Definitely
in the
not.
mix of all of this, and you're like impacting culture in so many ways, and then you got to get out.
And it's, yeah. And it's all bad, but to the rest of the world, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all great.
So to be well, you know, you're successful today, but looking back at Priority and all the things you guys have been through, what experience had to happen to be David Weiner now?
What experience? What experience had to happen? You know, I don't know what would have changed it. I mean, you asked if I knew I was going to be in music, and I didn't. I worked in record stores and loved music, but when I dropped out of college, I didn't say I'm going to go be in the music business. I knew the niche of one of the owners of Priority. And since I was such an NWA fan, when she said, my uncle owns Priority Records, I was, fuck, when's he coming over? I gotta meet this guy.
Of course.
And then I did. And he was this big Italian, crazy-haired mustache, like, not the guy I thought was behind NWA. And we didn't even get that close. We just met a few times. I'd tell him what we sold that day at the record store, because America's Most Wanted was out in retail at the time. And then a year went by. And then when I dropped out of college, and my friend knew, the niece, she mentioned that there was a mailroom job opening. And so that's how I ended up in there. So I guess that, I could have gone any which way in life.
Right, but from a business side, like the one valuable thing that really stays with you today.
Is there a big lesson that you took from your time at Priority?
just to all I've got is my word.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about my reputation and my word.
Right.
And even when I'm telling something they don't want to hear. Like, I went through something with an artist recently that was very painful. It was I'm not going to say his name, but it was an artist I worked with back in the 90s. And he was in a very bad place, and bad. I mean, just a horrible place, and lives down south and still affected by Katrina. And I tried to help him out. And I'm a fan, and we put this record out, and it was a disaster, just all bad. And he was upset. He was very upset. And you got to take the time and energy to address that.
Right.
The easy thing to do was, I tried, and I'm out, and lose my number. And that guy's going to sit there, and it's going to fester, and it's going to turn into something that's much bigger than the time it will take for me to take it on the chin and get on the phone with him and explain that I understand why you're upset, and I understand that you don't know what you're going to do now, and I'd be scared if I were you too. However, everything I did was from a good place. Everything that Travis did was from a good place. I want you to understand that we gave it a go. It didn't work, but and talk through the issue will get you so far, even if it's not what they want to hear. He's going to respect the outcome. And a lot of my career was built on just calling people back and telling them no. Thank you for calling me and telling me no.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much you're the only dude who ever called me. I sent my demo to 90 people. No one gave me any feedback.
Right.
And you called me back. And you didn't even tell me what I want to hear. And thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'd say that communicating when it's easier not to is got so much value.
Right.
And nine out of 10 people won't take the time to do it. It's easier to just move on to what's next and productive. And it's unpleasant to have those calls, but
yeah, we talk about that a lot.
Oh yeah,
that there's so much value in communicating bad news.
Yeah.
That
they respect it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a manager, I had countless unreturned phone calls when I was sending out music, or to this day, if we're pitching a brand, and there's such a difference when that person will take the time to tell you,
right,
that the answer is no, and even better if they tell you why, but yeah, just being able to close the door on something, that means a ton to people.
Yeah. And I think through that and do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
That's it. And those are both oxymorons in entertainment.
Sure.
So
so you're out of Priority, and I know you went
J-Core.
Yeah.
Well, I was out of the business. I was finger in the air. Fuck everything having to do with the music industry. I was pissed off. And angry. I mean, you knew me at that time.
Sure.
And
understandably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I was still pretty young at the time. And then
what year is that?
I think 2000.
Okay.
And that's when Dan Gill, who's now running BMG,
okay,
was heading up Jay Ferris's new operation called J-Core, because he just sold Mammoth Records to Disney for $25 million. So they courted me to run their urban division, and I was not interested, but I took the meeting, and they convinced me that I'd have complete autonomy to do what I need to do, And it was very important to me that whatever communication happened with these artists and rappers that I was involved in, because I'm not going to deal with any of the fuckery and any of the. I can't be number 2 if number 1 is doing something dirty.
Yeah.
Because that's going to affect me.
Yeah.
And that was my focal point.
Right.
Was as long as you don't, as long as you can shoot straight, we can give this a go. And the beauty that came out of that is that's when I met Tech N9ne. And Strange Music is what I signed to J-Core, in addition to a bunch of other artists and so forth. And I think it was a Tech N9ne video that we were shooting out here in L.A. And everything was set up for the shoot, and it was a big dollar production. And Jay Ferris called me the night before and said, "Pull the plug on the video." So what do you mean, pull the plug on the video? Video's happening tomorrow.
Right.
Like, call sheets are out. It's a done deal. He's like, pull the plug. I'm not paying for it. What are you saying to me? Is this a joke? And he was like, no, it's done. I said, that you can't do that. I can't allow you to do that.
Right.
He's like, well, it's done. So if you all meet, make sure to tell them they're working for free because I'm not paying them. And that was the beginning of the end.
I'm sure.
Right there.
Yeah.
Wait,
and
so what did you do?
I shut his office down. I was in Ice-T's office on Sunset. That's why I said say hi to Darlene, but she was a neighbor. But
yeah, that's right.
I knew that he had an office on Sunset and La Brea, and it was like crushed. What was it? Red velvet, and velvet black. It was Ice-T's office. It was like pimped out office that he didn't want anymore, but he had 2 years on the lease. And since I lived around the corner from Ice and Darlene, she told me about the office. We took it on. So, after that incident with Jay, I called him up and said, I'm pulling the plug on my staff on the West Coast on the hip hop division. He said, you can't do that. And they said, come out to New York. We'll do a little summit. It was the lawyer kind of playing middleman between me and Jay because he's the owner and I'm this rogue employee, right?
Right.
And it didn't go well, and I shut it down and sent the staff home, and it was a wrap. And then he pissed off Jimmy Iovine, and Iovine pulled the financing, and I went on with Tech and Strange Music and left them in the dust. And Jay went on to get fired from Lionsgate, and I don't know what he's doing now.
Right.
So another example of a typical entertainment situation where you need to decide, are you going to... I feel like for everybody in entertainment who's talented and has a skill set is faced with a decision and a choice at one point. And I refer to it as, are you going to keep it righteous or go to the dark side?
Right.
And most folks go to the dark side. That's where the money is. That's where...
Yeah, it's a lot flashier.
It's easier. Yeah. And guys like you and myself and a handful of other people out there who stayed close, and my circle's small.
Right.
And it's hard to keep an honest approach to a crooked industry. But once you've found other like-minded individuals who are the Brian Shaftons and all the hard-working, honest, looking in the eye and mean what they say, then you're insulated from a lot of the problems that allow you to focus and move forward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. At that moment, it would have been maybe tempting to just walk away completely.
From the industry, I wanted out altogether. And Dan and Jay talked me into it, and that Chateau Marmont lunch and
damn it,
a few mimosas.
the flashy stuff.
But so after that, right? So after J-Core...
After J-Core,
you might have just said,
I moved to Hawaii.
Fuck this, right?
That's what I did. I got so fed up with everything that I moved to Hawaii. Well, that's not true. I did a year.
Yeah.
So after J-Core, I put the financing together for Tech's next album. And we put out Absolute Power in 2001, 2002. And then I don't want to use the word burnout, but needed a break.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I moved to Hawaii and consulted Strange the whole time. Stayed involved with Strange.
Okay. Yeah.
And Strange kept growing and growing, and I was there for 5 years. And then when I came back, the company had gotten so big that you can only have one CEO, and it's kind of hard to find someone to take your workload off your plate when you're the CEO. And based on my background, experience, and relationship with Travis, it was the perfect timing for me to step in and help with development of Strange Music. And this is 2009.
Yeah.
Right.
So in between there, we did a little bit of work together. So, you know, I was working on Scion.
Yep.
And, you know, we'd given Scion the idea that we needed to be giving out music.
Right.
You know, putting music into the market. And I didn't know anything about the actual production of CDs.
Right.
And so I called you, and
Right.
you ended up manufacturing our CDs for a couple years.
Right.
And I bring that up because you taught me a really valuable lesson there.
Okay.
So, and I don't know how much of this you remember, but, you know, we were doing, I don't remember how much we did together, but we did 14 million CDs. Seven
We
7
probably
million
did
CDs
like,
together.
4 or 5 million with
Yeah.
you.
So it was a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, those are big numbers. And one day I got this call from the client who said, hey, you know, someone, I mean, we would get these calls all the time that somebody was getting in their ear that we were doing something wrong.
Okay.
Mostly, you know, bullshit.
Right.
But, you know, when an account's that big, a lot of people, the vultures come out, right?
Right.
And so anyway, someone had called our client and said that they're being overcharged for CDs.
Okay.
So, you know, before I assured her that that wasn't true,
Right.
so I called you and I said, and, you know, because of our relationship and because I knew enough about you,
Right.
right? We didn't go out and get multiple bids
Right.
to produce these CDs. I just called you and said, hey, let's do this together.
Right.
And because I knew you could help me through a process that I was unfamiliar with.
Right.
And I knew I could trust you. So I called you this one time and I said, hey, you know, I just need to ask you, like, are we overpaying? Like, if I go shop this around, am I going to find better pricing?
Right.
And what you said to me, you know, I remember obviously to this day, this was more than a decade ago. And you said, yeah, you will find better pricing. And here's why. Because you can get CDs cheaper if you outsource them overseas. And then you're going to have customs issues.
Right.
Which means delivery dates may not be exactly when you need them.
Right.
And more importantly, the way to get really cheap CDs is you go to the manufacturers that also make porn DVDs.
Right.
And we don't use those guys because there's some tiny percent chance
That
that
disc.
the disc might get switched.
Does Dallas makes it in Scion number 14.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? And then,
That's
you know, and so, you know, you could take that risk and save a few pennies or whatever it is,
Right.
you know.
There was a third one too. Now that you're
Okay.
And the third one was to find the manufacturer that didn't pay their Philips royalty.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's where we got undercut.
Right.
Was by
Yeah.
folks not paying their royalty.
Right. Yeah. So Philips owned the patent on the CD technology.
CD and DVD.
You had to
gotta
pay
royalty.
them every time you make a CD.
crazy.
So if you're a
And
plant
some-
and
Get
you're
in that
not paying your
business.
royalty, you're able to shave 4 cents off
Right.
every unit. When you're making 500,000
Yeah.
discs, I mean, half a penny matters.
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
500,000
Absolutely.
discs.
Right. So yeah. So there are these things. And then, you know, I had to decide, and I had that conversation with my client, that there are ways to cut corners and save money. You got to weigh those against the risk.
Right.
And, you know, for a public company, you know, the millionth of a % chance that porn is going to show up on one of their discs,
Right.
it's not worth it.
Right.
Right. Because at that point, the whole thing gets shut down.
Right.
You know, lawyers and publicists get
Oh, it's-
involved. And,
Yeah, and it did happen. Like it happened, not with you guys,
Right.
but in the industry.
I'm sure, yeah.
And the worst is when it would be like a kids movie with a porn in it. That happened as well.
Oh, my God.
Oh man.
Yeah,
That's
that's
terrible.
That's when I think they made it law that
Yeah.
you couldn't manufacture anything that would appeal to 18
Yeah.
and under.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah.
amazing. So that was really valuable for me, not just the information, obviously, but, you know, like you said, like your willingness to be, you know, to have that conversation, to help educate me and to be, you know, really a partner. And that's something we've carried into the company, you know, ever since then, is that, you know, when we're working with partners, that we need them to be partners to us and us to be
Right.
Like it's really got to be open communication.
Right.
And,
Absolutely. It's all about it. It's a marriage.
Absolutely.
Whether it's management, whether it's staff, whether it's your client.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not communicating properly,
Sure.
there's room for lots of misunderstandings.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
That
I
was-
didn't know.
That was really valuable.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I miss opportunity for being too straightforward, but, you know, it's who I am.
Right.
Well, it allows you to keep doing what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like, like you never have to backtrack.
No, I don't know. I'm not. And my boss and owner of Strange Music is a very serious man and very serious about his money and very serious about his family and his company. Very serious. And you know, he's had 15 years of auditioning me, is what it's been.
Yeah.
You know, and to be able to look him in the eye and know there hasn't been one ever issue, incident where, you know, I mean, sure, I've made mistakes, but where I wasn't honest about something, like he doesn't even have to think about it.
Right.
You know, how do you replace that?
You can't.
If I wrap up and close up shop tomorrow, of course, you know, everybody's replaceable. I'm not trying to say I'm not, but based on the trust factor, that doesn't happen overnight or even over 6 months. Years and years of really seeing someone, and when they would have done something shady, and you know firsthand they didn't. It's like they passed, and then they passed, and then now I don't have to think about it. And so, for a man that is as serious as he is about his business, and he's very OCD with his business, hands-on everything, for him to give me the autonomy to do, and I'm not as involved on the touring and the merch side. I'm really on the label side with the 12 artists. You know, that's the ultimate compliment to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anyone else you would trust with that business.
Yeah.
You know.
So if I worked for you at Strange, what would I hear you say over and over?
I guess you probably wouldn't, because there's so many, there's 70 people out there right now, and every call is that much different. So try another angle to that question.
Well, I just wonder, like, you know, as you know, I'm sure you serve as a mentor, like, to people coming up, you know, underneath you, and I wonder what do people feel? What do people learn from working with you?
Well, what's been interesting about this phase is I'm not there. You know, they're all out in Missouri. I'm here in L.A. Who could possibly think they could manage a staff from 1,500 miles away? We didn't know if I could.
Yeah.
You know, so we started small, and I took on one department, and then took on another department, and I think
why does it work?
It comes down to them respecting what you're bringing to them. So it's been very interesting to see it work, you know, and to.
So what have you learned about managing people remotely?
If they respect you, they're gonna go above and beyond. If they want to please you, if they want you to be proud of their efforts, and they're excited to show you what they did, they're going to go above and beyond, versus the salty, pissed off employee who sees an opportunity to take advantage of not being supervised. And since I'm in contact, you know, the second someone's dropping the ball, I'm on their ass. And they're usually bringing it to me before I'm on their ass, because they know I'm about to get on their ass, and bring the problem to me, address it, let's find the solution. And everyone ends up taking that same approach of dealing with the problem, instead of sweeping it under the rug until something small turned into something big. You deal with it. And I spent a lot of time with the staff, walking them through how to deal with, how to, even when it's not nice for them either. Hey, Dave, I really fucked this up here, and one, I want to understand what I did wrong, and two, how to fix it. Can you help me? And once you've had a few of those calls and you've guided them the right way, and even though it would have been better if you didn't make that mistake, you learned from it, and now it won't happen again. They're always going to come to you and respect your feedback. I mean, that's what I've learned.
So it sounds like, I mean, that's a certain kind of person that's going to embrace that environment where you're not there. They have a certain amount of freedom.
They have their own culture out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how do you, when you're hiring people, like how do you know what to look for?
Generally, I go to the department. The department head does the hiring.
Yeah.
So I'm not dealing with the hiring.
Okay.
I'm managing the department head, and they're dealing with the hiring. So the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I were out there, I'd be more involved in that kind of day to day. But that's more of, you know, if there's seven departments, 7 department managers, that's who I'm reporting to, and I deal with their staff. But I'm not going to be the one who decides who should be in that new job.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
They know best. They're there.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think it hurts you not being there?
I think it helps me being in LA,
Yeah.
so that I'm able to work with our publicist and do some of the LA related matters and meetings and so forth. But I'd definitely be able to do a better job out there. But I also think there's something to be said about if you're a hard worker, and some folks can't work out of their house. They just have too many distractions.
Sure.
They can't do it. I've heard so many funny stories about folks that tried with everything and failed. But if you can, and your work ethic is solid enough, I think there's an advantage to how much more I can get done, because I'm not there's not a line of people outside my office.
Right.
You can only be on one phone call.
Right.
Whereas when I'm out there with Travis and we're sitting in his office, there's a line of people, and they all
Yeah,
have
I'm
scheduled
sure.
appointments,
Right.
and then they're usually backed up because an appointment ran late, and so you know that's its own distraction. So I'm happy with it, and don't want to move to Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, so it's working. It's working better than any of us had hoped for, and it's an incredible staff, and it's what I've been hearing in the last 6 months. And I don't know why or what changed, but the amount of people wanting to come work with us because of our family vibe.
Yeah.
And that's how it was at Priority.
Yeah.
And you see what goes on with Priority today, the groups, the reunions, the Facebook pages, like it's its own little world. There's people I don't even know, like you know, that are screaming Priority records that I never even met, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people, but everyone stays together and looks out for each other. It's a family.
Yeah.
And to have that once in your career, I think you're blessed. And here it is happening again. But the way people are taking notice to it now is interesting. I don't know, and I don't know what changed or why, but that's ideal.
Yeah.
You know, because it's what it should be. You're together more than you are with your own family.
Right.
You guys are together more than you are with your wife and kid, because that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
To work and pay the bills. You know, so you better enjoy it. And that's another thing that we have a huge luxury at Strange is if we don't like you, you might be the most talented MC, but if you're a pain in the ass and chemistry is not right, you know, have a nice day.
Well, yeah, talk a little bit about that. I know you've told me in the past about the touring environment.
Yeah.
You know, the expectations for artists when they're out on tour and how you run that. And, you know, again, that stuck with me because that's so different than, especially the rap business.
Right.
But maybe just, you know, it's not the rock and roll lifestyle either, is it?
Well, we actually mirror it. In other words, we tour like the alternative world tours.
Yeah.
In other words, they're the ones who keep it streamlined. They're the ones who don't take nights off. They you know, I mean, if you're Metallica, that's another story. But if you're an upcoming alternative group, you're sleeping in a van and you're performing every single night of the week.
Yeah.
Or you're failing. And that's what we do. You know, we'll go out and do 55 city run in 57 days. And that's might be 3 weeks without a day off.
Yeah,
you know,
crazy.
and over that month and a half, you got 2 days off.
Yeah.
But that's how it makes money. Every day that we're not performing is costing us 10 to 15 grand in buses, drivers, insurance, everything.
Yeah.
So I love. There's an artist out there named Hobson, and we're all family and work closely with Funk Volume, their label, and I loved what Hobson said in an interview when someone asked him why you don't tour with Tech N9ne, because we've tried to make that happen, and he responded, I can't work that hard. He says, here's how it'll go. On by day 5, I'm pissed off. By day 10, I'm an asshole. And by day 15, I've told you all to fuck off and I've left the tour.
Right.
So to preserve my relationship with Strange Music, I can't go tour with them.
Yeah.
And that sums it up in terms of how hard, we're working.
Yeah.
To do 52 shows. I mean, we've done a 96 city run in 100 days, which I believe is a world record. We never, and that's not the little club tour. That's
those are theaters.
A 1,500 to 5,000 a night run.
Yeah.
So it'd be worth looking into and seeing if there is actually. But believe it or not, when you go get that world record, it's going to cost you $25,000.
Yeah.
To register with Guinness and everything else.
So, are there folks that, can you think of anybody that you wanted to sign, but it just wasn't like, you knew that it just wasn't going to be the right fit?
No, I mean, the only artist we ever wanted to sign that we failed at was Hobson. And that was because he's partners with Dame.
Right.
And they really wanted to do their own thing, and I respect them for it.
Yeah.
But no, there's never really been an artist that we went after, and in that process we realized it didn't fit. But what we do is we spend a year we courting, dating, however you want to call it.
Really?
In other words, if we're signing an artist right now that we've been working with for 4 years, and so the chemistry's great, and we know where we're at, and
is that common to like test out those relationships?
Yeah, and to take them out on tour with us, and to put them in the system, put them on some songs, put them in a video, work with them, see if it fits.
That seems pretty unique, right? Because most labels want to like tie you up as quickly as they can.
Yeah. And in our case, we wanna do as many test runs as we can, and it works both ways. They're feeling what we're feeling.
Sure.
If there's something that's not right, which hasn't really happened. In the history of the company, there's been 3 acts that have been let go, released from the label. And it was primarily attitude, I'd say.
Yeah.
Attitude, and because we'll stick with you if it's positive, but if you're not happy with your numbers and you're pointing fingers, and you're on stage every night, but you're not connecting with your fan base, there's and you're upset about it, but you're pointing at the wrong, like you're obviously not connecting with your audience. Right. That's the issue. So we're fortunate to not have that many. With every artist on Strange, it's very family oriented, and if someone has problems, we get in there and work on it. Family problems, health problems.
Yeah.
When my family went through a health crisis, Travis sent out a memo to the whole company to not contact me for a week, to lose my number and leave Dave alone, and everything everything you need from Dave, bring it to me. And I didn't even know he did that.
Right.
And how do you
right.
That's
amazing.
family.
Yeah.
And I love it. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, so this is a quick one to buy me a second here, but your favorite live show you've ever seen?
Man, that's so hard.
Come on, pick one.
That's always a hard one.
Pick one that stands out.
And then it's genres.
How about in the last year?
Hip-hop. I would say that the most incredible, in terms of hip-hop and live performances, instead of calling it a show, I'm going to name a venue.
Okay.
And that would have been Roxbury. Back in the early 90s, and then Glam Slam. Those 2 venues for hip-hop. That's where I first saw the Roots. And that's where, were you there when Dub C performed and some dude got stabbed in the forehead with a fork?
No.
And went run. It was...
At Roxbury?
At Roxbury.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, but it was a who's who. 2/3 of the crowd were artists.
Yeah.
And everything that happened at Roxbury was legendary. So, but as far as like one show, man.
What about a favorite DJ?
I can't call that either. I'm still trying to think of the one show.
Okay.
I mean, I wish I would have seen the Up in Smoke tour.
Yeah.
I got to say that what I saw on the DVD there was so impressive that I hated myself for missing that tour. That looked like the best hip-hop tour in history to date, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, whether it was Tribe Called Quest or whether it was Eminem and Jay-Z down the street at what was that, at the SIR Theater in front of 50 people, or I mean, it just, they were all great, man.
Yeah.
I can't name them. I mean, the Roots at Roxbury was a magical night.
Nice.
When you didn't know who they were, it was when they started.
Yeah.
And you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So the last real question. You made your career out of guys that could really go make it happen out in the streets.
Right.
Not relying on radio. But so how much do the streets matter today in this digital environment?
Well, it's more about instead of the streets, it's more about what's online and whether you have traction.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what your skill set is anymore. It matters how you look and how you connect. And you could take 10 MCs that can slaughter these 10 MCs on radio.
Yeah.
So what was the question?
Well, it's just how does that apply? How does that work ethic of making it happen in the streets from your neighborhood to your town?
Hood internet versus internet?
I guess so.
Let me answer in another way.
Yeah.
Okay. In today's day and age, the opportunity as a new artist, and there's no more excuses for what you can't do on your own.
Yeah.
There's no more, I can't do it unless I sign with a major because I'm not going to get a video and I'm not going to get, in other words, the only thing you're not going to get going independent is radio. And that's it. Right now, major labels are banks with a radio department, and that's what they are.
Yeah.
And everything else is accessible. And people come to me and say, how do you shoot a video if you only got $2,000? I said, well, you got a great budget with $2,000. You're in good shape, man.
Right.
I can introduce you to 10 directors that'll shoot that video. Or something I always suggest to folks who don't have the $2,000 is find your local film school. And go down to your local film school, introduce yourself as an artist and that you're looking for content.
Yeah.
And they're looking to shoot content. And you'll probably find a director you end up working with for the next 5 years out of there. So there's no more excuses. If you're, when these artists call up and say, man, I got this album, I don't know what to do next, and I'm broke, and man, you got time? When they're telling me they're married and they have kids and a day job, I say, you got a lot of obstacles to over, in other words, this might have done better 10 years earlier.
Sure.
Because you can't make the sacrifices and compromises that a youngster can.
Yeah.
But you're your only holdback at this point. You can make it all happen across the board, and you have access to every platform, every outlet, every blog. And if you can't connect in your region, then call it a hobby.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Thanks.
Yeah,
Dave Weiner,
thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. That was Dave Weiner. Hope you liked it. I had fun talking to him, and think there were some important lessons from that man. Come back next week. We'll have more for your listening pleasure. Meanwhile, leave us a comment or a review. Send us a note on Twitter or on our Facebook page. And bye.